was in January, in the middle of the school year, because that's how long it had taken the kids to run their former teacher out of the classroom. I didn't know that when I applied, but my very first morning I sat in this little office with the principal and he told me that. But I was 23 and it was my first teaching job, and nothing could make me feel less than excited. I had my photocopied chapters of The House on Mango Street, I had my plastic tub of color pencils, and I was ready to go. So he walked me up to my classroom, and right before he left, he just said, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "Well, maybe you should be." And then he left. So I'm standing there in this empty classroom, and the walls are bare, and the desks are all facing forward, and the fluorescent lights are humming, and I'm waiting for the kids to come in. So sure enough, the second bell rings, and they come flooding in. And I was so preoccupied with just making a good teacherly impression that I barely even noticed them. And I went through my lesson, and they read when they were supposed to read, and they wrote when they were supposed to write. And everything seemed fine, so I was like, what's the problem? I found out later, this was Chelsea High School, and Chelsea was in receivership, much like Holyoke. And the state kept bringing in these experts to take care of all their problems. So everyone thought I was a discipline expert that the school hired to like handle these kids, which could not have been further from the truth. I'm a total pushover. So anyway, this goes on for a couple days, but then finally the ice broke on Friday, last block. I was going through some really boring vocabulary list, and all of a sudden, Raul, who sat in the front row, he was a 15-year-old kid with facial hair and a big parka, and out of nowhere, he just goes, "Miss, our last teacher was such a jerk." And I was like, okay, if I engage in this conversation, I don't really know where it's gonna go. It might end up somewhere uncomfortable. I should probably just keep going through my vocab. And I was trying to decide how to respond, and then Carla, who was sitting next to him, this girl with gorgeous, long, shiny black hair, she said, "Yeah, miss, he was really mean to us." And I suddenly realized that like they had been through something with this teacher, and I hadn't really thought about it, and I hadn't asked them about it, and in fact, I hadn't really asked them anything about themselves at all. So more kids pipe up, and they're all telling me these stories about this guy, and the picture that I get is that he was basically a really old white man who had spent his whole career in private schools and really disrespected them. And I didn't want to end up like him, so I was like, I need to listen. So I put my vocab aside, and before I know it, the kids are all talking, and this other kid, Sean, this gangly kid with acne face, gets up in the front of the room and starts impersonating their teacher. And one of the things he does is he takes the whiteboard eraser and he puts it on the board, and with a straight elbow, he like marches to the other side of the board, and then he goes back where he starts, puts it like 2 inches under that, and marches across again, and the class like erupts in laughter. So then all of a sudden Sean goes, "Look everybody, no peep is laughing, no peep is laughing." And we all turn and look, and this student's name was Sopeep, and he was from Cambodia. And Sopeep didn't talk, ever. He was an elective mute. And he was a tiny guy, but he kind of like hunched into himself. And even his handwriting on the page was so tiny and light, I didn't even see it sometimes at first. This kid was just trying to be invisible. And I didn't know what trauma he had brought with him from Cambodia. But I would learn later that many of our kids were from parts of the world where they were coming from war and violence and poverty, and I knew nothing about it. We had kids from Iraq and Afghanistan, from Guatemala and El Salvador, kids from Serbia and Croatia. Nothing in my teacher ed program prepared me to understand them or to understand how my background, where I came from, was playing a part in this whole classroom dynamic. I had everything left to learn, and this was the day that it all started. So we all turn and look at Sopeep, and sure enough, there's like this little curl of a smirk in his cheek, and he's like moving imperceptibly as he laughs. And we start looking around at each other, and we were all just so happy that Sopeep was laughing and Sopeep was smiling. And we shared this moment of joy, and the bell rang, and they left for the weekend, and I stood there in the empty classroom. And I was like, this is the best job ever.